It was supposed to be just another afternoon at the Golden Whisk, the most exclusive patisserie in the city. Soft, classical music floated through the air. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across marble floors. The scent of imported vanilla and dark chocolate wrapped around well-dressed customers like silk. Then the glass door opened, hesitant. A woman in faded jeans and a stained jacket stepped inside, her hand wrapped protectively around a small girl's fingers. Rachel's auburn hair was pulled back with a rubber band. Her daughter Vicky wore sneakers with holes in the toes and a dress that had been washed so many times the color had nearly disappeared. They stood frozen just inside the doorway, staring at the towering cake display like it was a museum exhibit they weren't allowed to touch. Vicky whispered, her voice barely audible, "Mama, look at that one with the pink flowers. It's like a castle." Rachel's throat tightened. She counted the crumpled bills in her pocket one more time, already knowing the answer. She approached the counter, shoulders hunched, eyes down. The manager's perfectly painted lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Rachel leaned forward, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper, hoping only the manager would hear. "Excuse me, ma'am. I know this is unusual, but do you have any cakes that are expired or close to it? Just something small. It's my daughter's birthday today." The manager's expression shifted from annoyance to disgust. Behind them, a woman in a fur coat snorted. Another customer whispered something that made her companion laugh. But there was someone else who heard every word. Sitting alone in a corner booth, a demi-tasse of espresso untouched before him, was Sylvester Ramos, the Iron King, the man who made grown men weep with a single glance. His dark eyes were fixed on the woman at the counter, and for the first time in 10 years, his blood ran cold. Because Rachel's face, the curve of her jaw, the way she held herself even in humiliation, was identical to the wife he'd buried after a drive-by shooting meant for him. The manager's voice cut through the shop like a blade. "We don't sell garbage here, ma'am. This is the Golden Whisk, not a soup kitchen." Vicky's little shoulders drooped. Rachel blinked rapidly, fighting back tears, her hand tightening around her daughter's. Then a chair scraped across the floor. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Sylvester Ramos stood slowly, his 6'3" frame unfolding like a shadow coming to life. His black suit was perfectly tailored, a thin scar traced from his temple to his jaw. His presence sucked the air from the room. He walked toward them, his footsteps deliberate, measured. The manager went pale. Customers stepped back instinctively. Rachel turned, recognizing him instantly from news reports, from warnings whispered on street corners, from nightmares. But Sylvester didn't look at her yet. He crouched down, bringing himself to Vicky's eye level. His expression softened in a way no one in that room had ever seen before. "Tell me, little one," he said, his voice gentle as smoke, "which cake would make your birthday perfect? Stay until the end, because what the Iron King does next will prove that even the coldest hearts can burn with something more dangerous than rage. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My wife said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her these tales matter by clicking the subscribe button, like and comment where you're watching from." Sylvester's question hung in the air like a held breath. Vicky stared at him, her small hand still clutching her mother's worn jacket, unsure whether to answer the scary man in the expensive suit or hide behind her mama's legs. The one with the pink flowers," she finally whispered, pointing at a 3-tiered masterpiece that cost more than Rachel made in 2 months. Sylvester stood, his movement fluid and controlled. He turned to the manager, whose face had drained of all color. "That one," he said, his voice no longer gentle, "and the chocolate torte beside it, and the lemon cake, and every other cake in this display." The manager's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Sir, that's the entire—" Did I stutter? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sylvester's gray eyes were flat, emotionless. Every single one. "Of course, Mr. Ramos. Right away, sir." The manager's hands trembled as she began pulling cakes from the display. Her earlier cruelty evaporated like morning mist. Rachel found her voice, though it came out shaky. "Sir, you don't need to. We can't accept." Sylvester held up one hand, silencing her without a word. He pulled out his phone and typed something. Within seconds, the glass door opened. Two men in dark suits entered, moving with the practiced efficiency of soldiers. One had a tattoo creeping up his neck. The other wore sunglasses despite being indoors. "Marco, get someone to deliver all of these to the estate," Sylvester said without turning around, "and have Sophia prepare the guest wing. We're having visitors." "Yes, boss." Marco's voice was gravel and smoke. Sylvester finally looked at Rachel properly, and something flickered across his face too quickly to read. Recognition, pain, something else. "You and your daughter are coming with me." It wasn't a question. We don't even know you," Rachel stammered, instinctively pulling Vicky closer. Every news report, every whispered warning about the Iron King flooded her mind. "Thank you for the kindness, but we should go." "You're cold. Your daughter is hungry, and you came into an expensive bakery to beg for expired food." Sylvester's voice softened slightly, but the command remained. "I'm offering you something better. One meal, one birthday celebration for your little girl. If you want to leave after that, Marco will drive you wherever you want to go." Rachel looked down at Vicky, whose eyes were wide with confused hope. The woman in the fur coat was filming on her phone. The other customers whispered behind manicured hands. The manager packed cakes into expensive boxes with shaking fingers, shooting fearful glances at Sylvester every few seconds. "Just one meal?" Rachel asked, hating how her voice cracked with desperate hope. "Just one meal," Sylvester confirmed. "My word." The word of a Mafia boss. It should have meant nothing, but something in his eyes when he looked at Vicky, that strange gentleness, made Rachel's resistance crumble. "Okay," she whispered. Sylvester nodded once. "Marco, take them to the car. Carefully." He emphasized the last word, a warning threaded through silk. As Marco led them toward the door, his massive frame shielding them from the staring crowd, Rachel glanced back. Sylvester was still standing there, watching them leave, his expression unreadable. His untouched espresso sat cold and forgotten on the table. Behind him, the manager had collapsed into a chair, fanning herself with trembling hands. The door closed behind them, and Rachel wondered what kind of fairy tale she'd just stepped into, the kind with happy endings or the kind that ended in blood. The car was quieter than any vehicle Raquel had ever been in. Black leather seats that didn't have a single crack or stain. Windows tinted so dark the outside world looked like a shadowy dream. Vicky sat pressed against her mother, eyes wide, watching the city transform from cramped apartment buildings to tree-lined streets with houses that looked like they belonged in magazines. Marco drove without speaking, his eyes occasionally flicking to the rear-view mirror. The other man, whose name no one had mentioned, sat in the passenger seat, equally silent. The only sound was the soft purr of the engine and Vicky's quiet breathing. When they finally stopped, Raquel's breath caught in her throat. The Ramos estate wasn't a house, it was a fortress disguised as a palace. Iron gates swung open automatically, revealing a circular driveway with a fountain at its center. The mansion beyond was all stone and glass, 3 stories of windows that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Gardens stretched in every direction, manicured to perfection. "This way," Marco said, his first words since they'd left the bakery. His voice was gentler than his appearance suggested. They were led through massive double doors into an entrance hall with marble floors and a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a cathedral. A woman appeared at the top of the curved staircase, descending with practiced grace. She was in her 50s, silver-haired, wearing a simple but elegant dress. "You must be Raquel and Vicky," she said warmly, her accent carrying traces of Italian. "I'm Sophia. I manage the household. Mr. Ramos called ahead and asked me to make you comfortable." Raquel opened her mouth, but no words came. Vicky hid behind her mother's legs, peeking out at the overwhelming grandeur. Sophia smiled knowingly. "I imagine this is all quite overwhelming. Come, let me show you to your rooms, and we'll get you both cleaned up. Dinner will be in 2 hours, but I can have something brought up immediately if you're hungry." We don't want to be any trouble, Raquel managed. Nonsense, it's no trouble at all. Sophia gestured toward the staircase. This way, dear. The guest wing was on the second floor. Sophia opened a door to reveal a suite larger than the entire apartment Raquel and Vicky shared. Cream-colored walls, a king-sized bed with more pillows than seemed necessary, a sitting area with plush chairs, and windows overlooking the gardens. An adjoining door led to a smaller room clearly meant for a child, decorated in soft pastels, with stuffed animals arranged on a pristine white bed. "Oh," Vicky breathed, breaking free from her mother to explore, her worn sneakers silent on the thick carpet. Sophia opened an enormous closet. Inside hung dresses, casual clothes, even pajamas, all in various sizes. I took the liberty of having some options brought in. Nothing too fancy, just comfortable things. Please help yourselves to whatever fits. There are fresh towels in the bathroom, and if you need anything at all, there's a phone by the bed. Just press 0 and someone will come." Raquel stared at the clothes, tears threatening. "I don't understand. Why is he doing this?" Sophia's expression softened with something that looked like old pain. "Mr. Ramos has his reasons, but I can tell you this. He doesn't do anything without purpose, and he never breaks his word." She moved toward the door and then paused. "You're safe here, both of you. That's not something I say lightly." When the door closed, Raquel sank on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed. Through the adjoining door, she could hear Vicky laughing softly, probably holding one of those pristine stuffed animals. They'd traded their tattered clothes for silk and safety, but Raquel couldn't shake the feeling that they'd also traded one kind of danger for something far more complicated. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 20 people, though only 3 chairs were occupied. Vicky sat wide-eyed in a pink dress that actually fit, her hair freshly washed and tied with a new ribbon. Rachel wore a simple blue dress that felt like wearing clouds. Sylvester sat at the head of the table in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, the first time Rachel had seen him without his jacket. He looked almost human. Almost. The food arrived on fine china, carried by silent staff who moved like ghosts. Roasted chicken, vegetables that hadn't come from a can, bread so fresh it steamed when broken. Vicky ate like she was afraid it might disappear, while Rachel could barely swallow past the knot in her throat. "You said 1 meal," Rachel said quietly, watching Sylvester cut his food with mechanical precision. "After this, we should go." Sylvester set down his knife and fork, the soft clink loud in the vast room. "I need to show you something first." He stood, and Rachel's body tensed instinctively, but he simply gestured toward a door at the far end of the dining room. "Please, both of you." Vicky looked at her mother for permission. Rachel nodded, though every instinct screamed that they were walking deeper into something they didn't understand. The room Sylvester led them to was clearly his study. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk positioned before tall windows. But he didn't stop there. He walked to the far wall where a large canvas hung, covered by a burgundy curtain. 10 years ago, Sylvester said, his back still to them, his hand resting on the curtain's edge. "I was married. Her name was Isabella." His voice was stripped of all the command it had held in the bakery, in the car, even at dinner. Now it was just raw. "She was everything I wasn't. Kind, patient. She saw something in me worth saving, though God knows why." He pulled the curtain aside. Rachel's hand flew through her mouth. The woman in the portrait could have been her sister. No, closer than that. The same auburn hair, the same heart-shaped face, the same curve of the jaw. The eyes were different, darker, but the resemblance was impossible to ignore. "I was in a meeting when it happened, a rival family. They knew the route she took home from the market. They were aiming for me, but I wasn't there." His fingers curled into a fist against his thigh. "She died on a sidewalk, 3 blocks from our house, holding groceries. She was going to make me dinner." Vicky pressed closer to her mother, sensing the weight of the story even if she didn't understand all the words. "When you saw me in that bakery," Sylvester finally turned to face them, and his eyes were haunted. For a moment, I thought I was losing my mind. The way you stood, the way you held your daughter's hand like she was the only thing keeping you tethered to the world, the way you made yourself small, trying to take up less space in a room that judged you for existing. He paused. Isabella used to do that too, before she met me, before I taught her she didn't have to. I'm not her, Rachel whispered. I know. Sylvester's voice was firm now. But when I heard you beg for expired cake for your daughter's birthday, I heard every prayer I never got to answer for Isabella, every moment I failed to protect her. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming but not threatening. I can't bring her back, but I can make sure you and your daughter never have to beg again. This isn't charity, Rachel said, understanding dawning like cold water. This is penance. Sylvester didn't deny it. The next afternoon, Vicky discovered what a real birthday party looked like. The garden had been transformed. Balloons in every shade of pink and purple danced in the breeze. A long table groaned under the weight of cakes from the golden whisk, plus 3 more that had appeared overnight. Streamers hung from trees that probably cost more to maintain than Raquel's yearly rent. And in the center of it all, a pile of wrapped presents that made Vicky's eyes fill with tears. "Is this all for me?" she whispered, clutching her mother's hand. Sylvester stood nearby, hands in his pockets, watching the little girl's wonder with an expression Raquel couldn't quite read. "Happy birthday, Vicky." Sophia had invited some children from the neighborhood, kids of employees and business associates, so Vicky wouldn't be alone. They ran through the garden like it was a park meant for them, their laughter foreign to the estate's usual silence. Sylvester stood apart, observing like a general watching maneuvers, until Vicky ran up to him with something clutched in her small fist. "Mr. Sylvester," she said, slightly breathless, "I drew you something." He took the crumpled paper carefully, unfolding it to reveal a crayon drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall in black, one medium in blue, one small in pink. Above them, a yellow sun smiled down. "That's you and Mama and me," Vicky explained, unnecessarily, "because you're nice, and you gave me a birthday." Something cracked in Sylvester's carefully maintained composure. He crouched down, eye level with her, just as he had in the bakery. "Thank you. This is the best gift anyone's ever given me." "Really?" Vicky's eyes went wide. "Really." He carefully folded the drawing and slipped it into his shirt pocket, right over his heart. As the party continued, Raquel watched Sylvester gradually soften. When a little boy's balloon flew into a tree, Sylvester retrieved it without being asked. When Sophia brought out the birthday cake, he actually smiled, a real one, as everyone sang off-key. And when Vicky insisted he help her open presents, he sat on the grass in his expensive pants and handed her boxes like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're good with her," Raquel said quietly when they were briefly alone, watching Vicky show off a new doll to her temporary friends. "I'm not good with anyone," Sylvester replied, but there was no edge to it, just honesty. "You're wrong." Raquel looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the scar and the reputation. "My daughter hasn't stopped smiling since we got here. That's not nothing." For the first time since Isabella's funeral, Sylvester felt something foreign stirring in his chest. Not the cold rage that had sustained him for a decade, not the emptiness that made business decisions easy. The warmth. The kind that comes from birthday cake and children's laughter and a woman who looked at him like he might be human after all. The kind that makes a man vulnerable. And in his world, vulnerability was a death sentence. 3 miles across the city, in a restaurant basement that didn't appear on any map, Dante Corsini sat at a table with men who would normally be corpses for entering Ramos territory. Vincent Caruso, head of the Caruso family, poured whiskey with steady hands. Luca Romano, whose brother Sylvester had buried 5 years ago, leaned back in his chair with a smile that promised violence. And Tommy Chen, the youngest of the group, but the most ambitious, drummed his fingers on the table like he was counting money he didn't yet have. "Gentlemen," Dante said, his voice smooth as the whiskey, "thank you for accepting my invitation." "You've got balls, Corsini," Vincent said, though there was respect in it. "Meeting with us behind the Iron King's back. He finds out, you're dead." "He won't find out. He's too busy playing house." Dante's lip curled with disgust. He pulled out his phone, swiping through photos his inside man had sent. Sylvester crouching in grass, handing a little girl a birthday present. Sylvester smiling at a balloon. Sylvester looking at the woman like she was made of glass and prayers. "Christ," Luca muttered, leaning forward. "Is that really him?" "That's the man who gutted my cousin for looking at him wrong," Tommy added, disbelief thick in his voice. "Sitting on the ground at a kid's birthday party." "That's a man who's lost his edge," Dante corrected. "For 10 years, Sylvester Ramos has been untouchable because he had nothing to lose. No family, no weakness, just pure, cold calculation." He tapped the photo of Sylvester and Rachel. Now he's got 2 liabilities sleeping under his roof. 2 very soft, very killable reasons to hesitate. Vincent swirled his whiskey thoughtfully. "What's your play here, Dante? You want us to hit them?" "No. I want you to understand what I'm about to do." Dante leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Sylvester has been blinded by a ghost. This woman looks like Isabella, so he thinks he can rewrite history. But this isn't love, it's delusion. And a delusional leader gets everyone killed. So you're staging a coup," Luca said flatly. "I'm saving the syndicate," Dante's voice hardened. "In 3 days, I'm calling a family meeting. Every captain, every lieutenant. I'm going to show them these photos and ask them a simple question. Do we follow a king who's gone soft, or do we survive?" Tommy leaned back. "And if they choose survival, then the Ramos Syndicate gets new leadership, and you 3 get to carve up the territory we've kept from you for a decade." Dante smiled, cold and calculated. "Call it a severance package." "What about the woman and the kid?" Vincent asked. Dante's expression didn't change. "Collateral damage. Sylvester created them as liabilities. I'm just following through on the obvious conclusion." Luca raised his glass. "To new leadership." The others joined him, crystal clinking in a basement tomb. Above them, the city continued its evening routine, unaware that the Iron King's throne was already crumbling beneath him. Rachel had been at the estate for 5 days when she decided to take a walk down the long driveway. Vicky was napping, exhausted from another morning of running through gardens that seemed to have no end. Sophia had assured her it was safe, that the grounds were monitored, that nothing could touch them here. But Rachel needed air that didn't taste like luxury and guilt. The driveway curved through manicured hedges and past flower beds that looked painted rather than planted. At the gate there was a small mailbox, ornate iron with the Ramos family crest. Rachel had noticed the groundskeeper checking it each morning, though she couldn't imagine who would send mail to a crime lord. Curiosity pulled her forward. The mailbox wasn't locked. Inside, nestled on top of a few business envelopes, was a small white box tied with black ribbon. No address, no postage, just the box. Rachel's hands trembled as she pulled it out. It was light, almost empty. She untied the ribbon, lifted the lid, and her blood turned to ice. A single bullet lay cushioned in black velvet. Beside it, a note in precise handwriting. Beautiful dress. Shame about the target on her back. The box slipped from her fingers, hitting the ground with a soft thud. The bullet rolled onto the gravel, gleaming in the afternoon sun like a promise. Rachel ran. She didn't remember the sprint back to the house, didn't remember bursting through the front door or Sophia's startled cry. She only remembered finding Sylvester in his study, demanding to know what fresh hell she'd dragged her daughter into. He read the note once. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, something cold and ancient and absolutely lethal. "Marco," he said into his phone, his voice deadly calm. "Lock down the estate. No one in or out without my direct approval.
and find Dante now." He ended the call and looked at Rachel, who was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Pack your things. I'm moving you to a safe house." "No." The word came out stronger than she felt. "You're going to tell me the truth, all of it, because I left poverty for this, for silk dresses and birthday parties, and now someone's sending me bullets like party favors." Sylvester stood slowly, moving around the desk until he was close enough that she could see the scar on his jaw pulse with tension. "The truth is that by bringing you here, I painted targets on both your backs. The truth is that there are men in my own organization who see you as weakness. The truth is that someone just declared war, and you and Vicky are standing in the middle of the battlefield." "Then let us go," Rachel whispered. "Let us disappear." "They've already seen you, already marked you." Sylvester's jaw clenched. "The only way you survive now is if I eliminate the threat completely." "What does that mean?" His eyes met hers, and she saw the monster everyone whispered about. "It means blood. A lot of it." Rachel looked at the bullet on his desk, gleaming like a fallen star. She'd escaped poverty only to discover that some cages are gilded and some protectors are more dangerous than the threats they defend against.
The night came soft and quiet, the kind of peaceful that makes people forget the world has teeth. Vicky sat propped against pillows in her borrowed room, wearing pajamas covered in stars. Sylvester sat at the edge of her bed, a children's book in his hands, reading about a princess who befriended a dragon. His voice, usually sharp as broken glass, had gone gentle for the little girl who'd drawn him into her crayon family. "Does the dragon stay nice?" Vicky asked, her eyes heavy with approaching sleep. "He does," Sylvester said, "because someone finally saw him as more than a monster." Rachel stood in the doorway, watching this impossible scene. The Iron King, feared across 3 states, reading fairy tales with the kind of focus he probably gave to execution orders. She'd moved to step inside when her phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. "Kitchen door, now." Something in those 2 words made Rachel's stomach drop. She found Sophia in the hallway, face pale, holding a tablet, security footage. "They cut the power to the south cameras 3 minutes ago. Marco's trying to reach Mr. Ramos, but his phone's in the study." "Who cut the power?" "I think you know." Rachel's breath caught. She ran back toward Vicky's room, but she was too late. The windows exploded inward. Glass shattered across hardwood as 6 men in black tactical gear repelled through the opening, their movements synchronized and lethal. Sylvester moved on pure instinct, throwing himself over Vicky as bullets chewed through the walls where his head had been a second before. "Sylvester Ramos," Dante's voice echoed from the hallway, amplified and cold. "Your reign ends tonight." More gunfire. The bookshelf beside the bed erupted in splinters. Sylvester grabbed Vicky, who was screaming now, and rolled behind the overturned mattress. His hand went to the ankle holster he always wore, even reading bedtime stories. "The closet," he barked at Rachel, who'd frozen in the doorway. "There's a panic room behind the false wall. Get her inside, now." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." His eyes met hers, and she saw the lie in them. Rachel scooped up Vicky, the little girl's screams muffled against her shoulder, and ran for the closet. Her hands shook as she found the hidden latch, pushed through into a steel-lined room barely larger than a prison cell. Through the closing door, she saw Sylvester stand, saw him step into the hallway, gun raised, saw the smile on his face that had nothing human in it. "Dante," he called out, his voice carrying over the gunfire. "You brought 6 men. You should have brought 60. The panic room door sealed with a hiss, cutting off the sound of what came next. But Rachel heard it anyway. The gunshots, the screaming, the wet, terrible sounds of violence unleashed. Vicky buried her face in her mother's chest, crying for the man who'd read her stories about dragons. Outside, the dragon showed them exactly what monsters do when you threaten their treasure. The hallway became an abattoir. Sylvester moved through the smoke and chaos like death wearing a tailored suit. The first man through Vicky's door never saw the bullet coming. The second managed to raise his weapon before Sylvester's knife found the gap between his vest and collarbone. The third got a shot off that grazed Sylvester's shoulder, painting his white shirt red, but it only made him faster, more furious. Dante had made one catastrophic miscalculation. He'd assumed that loving something made Sylvester weak. He'd forgotten that the most dangerous animal is the one protecting its young. "Fall back!" someone screamed from the stairwell. Jesus Christ, fall back!" But there was nowhere to fall back to. Marco and the estate's security team had sealed the exits. Sylvester had trained them for this exact scenario, had drilled them on lockdown protocols until they moved like extensions of his will. The wolves had walked into a trap built by a bigger wolf. Sylvester found Dante on the main staircase, flanked by two remaining men, his confident smile finally cracking into something that looked like fear. "This is about her, isn't it?" Dante said, trying to keep his voice steady. "The woman who looks like Isabella? You've gone soft, Sylvester. Everyone sees it." "Soft?" Sylvester's laugh was broken glass and grave dirt. Blood dripped from his knuckles, his shoulder, a cut above his eye. He looked like a demon clawed from hell. "You think love made me weak, Dante? Love is the only thing that kept the monster chained." He moved. Dante's guards fired, but Sylvester was already inside their range, his knife singing its terrible song. One went down, clutching his throat. The other managed to land a punch that would have dropped a normal man, but Sylvester barely flinched. He grabbed the man's vest, drove his head into the marble banister once, twice, and let gravity finish the job. Dante stumbled backward, gun raised but shaking. "I was trying to save the syndicate. You were losing focus, getting distracted by a woman and a kid who aren't even—" "Say her name." Sylvester's voice dropped to something subterranean. "The little girl whose birthday party you interrupted with bullets. Say her name." Dante's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot went wide. Sylvester's didn't. The Iron King stood over his former consigliere, breathing hard, covered in blood that was mostly not his own. Around him, the estate had gone quiet, except for Marco's men securing the perimeter and checking bodies. Sophia appeared at the top of the stairs, tablet in hand. "Sir, we've identified the families Dante was meeting with. Do you want—" "Send a message," Sylvester interrupted. "Anyone who stood with Dante against me has 24 hours to leave the city. After that, I hunt." He holstered his weapon and turned towards the panic room, toward the two people he just painted his hands red to protect. The monster had protected his treasure. Now he had to convince them he was still a man.
3 weeks after the night of blood and bullets, Sylvester stood in his study burning the past. Ledgers that documented a decade of violence turned to ash in the fireplace. Contracts written in threats and fear curled and blackened. Names of enemies, allies, debts owed and debts collected, all of it fed to the flames until the room smelled like smoke and endings. Marco watched from the doorway, arms crossed. "You sure about this, boss?" "I'm sure." Sylvester dropped another ledger into the fire. "The old kingdom is dead. Dante proved that. Half my captains would have followed him if I'd given them time to choose. And the other half stayed loyal. Loyal to fear, to reputation." Sylvester turned from the flames. "I'm tired of ruling through terror, Marco. I'm tired of being the monster everyone expects. What are you going to be instead?" Sylvester didn't answer. He walked past Marco, through halls that had been scrubbed clean of blood, but would never quite feel clean again, to the garden where Rachel sat on a bench watching Vicky chase butterflies. The little girl had nightmares now, woke up screaming about broken glass and loud noises. But in the daylight, with her mother near and the dragon man who'd protected her never far away, she was learning to be a child again. Rachel looked up as Sylvester approached. She'd stopped flinching when he entered rooms, stopped watching him like he might explode. The fear had been replaced by something more complicated. Understanding, maybe,
or acceptance of what he was and what he'd done to keep them breathing. "I've been thinking," Sylvester said, sitting beside her but leaving space between them, careful, always careful with her, "about names, new ones, new names, for all three of us." He watched Vicky spin with her arms out, dizzy with simple joy. "The Ramos name comes with too much blood, too many enemies who'll spend their lives waiting for revenge. But if Sylvester Ramos dies on paper, if a different family emerges somewhere quiet," he finally looked at Rachel, "we could be normal, or as close to normal as I'm capable of." Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "You're asking us to disappear with you?" "I'm asking if you want to stay, not as my project, not as my penance for Isabella," his voice was rough with honesty, "as my family. If you'll have a monster who's trying very hard to remember how to be a man." "You saved our lives," Rachel said softly. "You saved mine first." Sylvester's hand moved toward hers on the bench, stopped just short. "In that bakery, when you asked for expired cake and reminded me that some things are worth protecting." Rachel closed the distance, her fingers threading through his. They were both scarred, both carrying damage that would never fully heal. But sometimes broken things fit together in ways that whole things never could. "What name were you thinking?" Rachel asked. Sylvester smiled. "A real one. I was hoping you'd choose." Vicky ran over, breathless and laughing, and climbed into his lap without fear. The Iron King was dead. A father was learning to be born.
The sun dipped lower in the garden, painting everything gold and amber. Vicky had fallen asleep against Sylvester's chest, her small fingers clutching the collar of his shirt like an anchor. Rachel leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sky change colors. "Morrison," she said quietly. "I always liked that name. Simple, unremarkable." The Morrison family. Sylvester tested the words, found them fitting. Where should the Morrisons live? Somewhere with good schools, a backyard, maybe near the ocean so Vicky can learn what waves sound like, Rachel smiled. Somewhere no one asks questions about the past. "I know a place," Sylvester said. "Small town in Oregon. Marco has family there. We'd be protected but not watched." In the distance, Sophia was directing movers. The estate would be sold, the money distributed to those who'd stayed loyal and the families of those who hadn't. The Ramos empire was being dismantled brick by bloody brick, replaced by something smaller but infinitely more valuable. A chance. "I'm going to make mistakes," Sylvester said into the gathering dusk. "I don't know how to be a father. I barely know how to be human." "Good thing we have time to learn." Rachel squeezed his hand. "All of us." Vicky stirred, mumbled something about cake and dragons, then settled back into sleep. Sylvester looked down at her, this little girl who'd asked for expired cake and received a kingdom, this child who'd drawn him into her crayon family and made him believe he could be more than the sum of his sins. The Iron King had ruled through fear and died in fire, but from his ashes something unexpected had grown. Love, family, hope. The most dangerous things a monster could ever possess, and the only things worth fighting for. 3 months later, a man named David Morrison enrolled his daughter in an elementary school in a coastal Oregon town. His wife, Sarah, opened a small bakery that gave away day-old cakes to anyone who asked. And in the evening, when the world grew quiet, he read his daughter stories about dragons who learned that being feared and being loved were two very different kinds of power. The past would always have teeth, but the future, he'd discovered, could taste like birthday cake and second chances. And that was enough.
What this story teaches us. This story reminds us that redemption is possible, even for those who believe they're beyond saving. It teaches us that true strength isn't found in power or fear, but in the courage to protect what we love and the willingness to change for those who matter most. We learn that kindness costs nothing, but can change everything. A single act of compassion, whether it's helping a struggling mother or giving a child her first real birthday, can ripple outward in ways we never imagined.
The story also shows us that our past doesn't have to define our future. Sylvester was the Iron King, a man built from violence and loss, but he chose to become David Morrison, a father learning to love. We all carry scars and regrets, but every day offers a chance to write a different ending. Most importantly, this story teaches that family isn't always about blood. It's about who stays when the bullets fly, who holds your hand in the darkness, and who believes you're more than your worst moments. Sometimes the families we choose save us more than the ones we're born into. Love makes us vulnerable, yes, but it also makes us human. And being human, with all its messiness and risk, is worth more than any kingdom built on fear. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button to support the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that second chances are real and that it's never too late to choose love over fear. Comment below and tell us what moment in the story moved you the most. We love hearing from you. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next heartfelt story. We have more tales of redemption, hope, and the power of human connection coming your way. Thank you for being part of our community. Your support means everything.